I'm a huge fan of visionaries, leaders and revolutionaries who have impacted not just their people but the entire world and are responsible for bettering not just their lives but the lives of everybody along the way. Now, someone I feel that falls perfectly in this category is Mr. Lee Kuan Yew. Hello and welcome to Histories Heroes. My name is Djaji Prime, and on this week's episode we're talking about Lee Kuan Yew. Now, born Harry Lee Kuan Yew meaning light and brightness, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew is the first Prime Minister of Singapore, who fought for Singapore's independence and is also largely responsible for the great success with which Singapore witnesses today. Mr. Lee Kuan Yew is responsible for transforming Singapore from a small port city to a dynamic and vibrant economy with a rich multicultural heritage. Now, having been a straight A student all his life, in fact he even came first in the senior Cambridge exams in 1940, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew later went on to the Raffles College. Now, a quick side note, Raffles College is named after Sir Thomas Stamford Raffles, who you could sort of say is the founding father of Singapore. He was a British individual who was responsible for making Singapore a transit point between India and China. But we'll probably be talking about him in a later video. But anyway, Lee Kuan Yew went to Raffles College. He was admitted on a scholarship. However, he had to stop his studies due to World War II and the Japanese occupation of Singapore. He would later on continue his studies in England at the Fitzwilliams College. He would later go on to graduate with a double-star first-class degree in law. Now, instead of staying in England, no, Lee Kuan Yew went back to Singapore and started practicing law there. It was around this time that he founded the People's Action Party in 1954. Lee Kuan Yew then was at the forefront of fighting for Singapore's independence from the British. Now, as a politician, Lee Kuan Yew favoured long-term pragmatic social and economic development instead of populist movements or populist policies. Lee Kuan Yew made multiculturalism and meritocracy as the founding principles of Singapore. He then went on to make English the common language, thus ensuring integration between the various ethnic groups within Singapore. Now, Singapore is a very diverse place. You have ethnically Chinese, Indian and Malay people. Now, another benefit from making English the common language in Singapore was that it enabled Singapore to be a viable economic partner with the West within Asia. Now, Lee Kuan Yew understand that in order to make Singapore a great country, corruption needed to be non-existent, the people needed to be educated, and the economy needed to be strong. Now, in order to fight corruption effectively, Lee Kuan Yew empowered the Corrupt Practices Investigation Bureau to arrest, search and call witnesses and suspects, giving them access to bank accounts, income taxes, and even the families were also to be investigated. Ministers within Lee Kuan Yew's cabinet were also well paid, a sort of a hindrance or a sort of to prevent them from feeling the need to be corrupt or to embezzle state funds. Now, in order to develop the economy, Lee Kuan Yew understood that the infrastructure of Singapore needed to be at a world-class standard, so there was heavy investment in the infrastructural development of Singapore. Now, the purpose of developing infrastructure was to attract multinational corporations. Now, after Singapore gained independence, it merged with Malaysia. However, this merge did not last long, and in 1965, on August the 9th, the merger was dissolved. Now, there were various reasons for this, but the two main reasons were ethnic tensions resulting in riots and also because of the dominance of Singapore's ports. Now, the way that Singapore's ports were structured would make it in such a way that Singapore was more dominant and would eventually shift political power from Kuala Lumpur to Singapore. So another thing, just the ethnic tensions before I forget. Basically, within Malaysia, Malays were seen as better than everybody else. Now, this was different from the ideology in Singapore, in which everybody was equal. Singapore also functioned as sort of a secular state, whereas Malaysia put Islam as the nation's religion. So the difference in the ideology in that economic aspect made the Malays uneasy with Singapore. Malaysia voted to expel Singapore in a parliamentary vote, with 126 votes being for the expulsion of Singapore and no votes being against it. Lee Kuan Yew was devastated by this result, and in a tearful speech he announced the new country. Following this, he disappeared on a Singaporean island for 6 weeks with nobody being able to contact him through phone or any other means of communication. Lee Kuan Yew assured them that though Singapore was distraught, they would go back and re-strategize on how to best tackle the problem of now being a small and an independent nation. So Lee Kuan Yew remained resolute despite this major setback, and following the dissolution from Malaysia, he then went to place Singapore within the UN and founded ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, on August the 8th, 1964, along with 4 other Southeast Asian nations. He also sought to develop Singapore's defenses, as Singapore was in a very vulnerable state, especially with countries like Indonesia being very aggressive. They had no means of defending themselves, so Singapore sought the consultation of countries like Israel and Taiwan for training and logistical support. Now, despite the dissolution with Malaysia, the Malay and Borneo dollar was still used as legal tender within Singapore until 1967, when the Singaporean dollar was introduced. Now, even though Lee Kuan Yew is an extraordinary leader responsible for developing Singapore, his leadership is often criticized as authoritarian and suppressing freedom and opposition, particularly by not allowing public protests, by controlling the media, and filing lawsuits against his political opponents. Now, Lee Kuan Yew would argue that these measures were necessary in order to maintain political and economic stability, as well as the rule of law, which was necessary for economic progress. Now, Lee Kuan Yew, in my opinion, is an extraordinary leader. Here is an individual who fought for his people, who was meticulous and a grassroots campaigner. He took the path of ensuring that his people would have long-term success and would live in a society that would always be beneficial to them. Initially, it wasn't easy. Singapore had to go through some very difficult times, but the kind of leader he was able to communicate with his people. Like I said, he was a grassroots campaigner. He would go to local markets and city squares and speak to the people directly. He was a people's man, a man of the people, and when he passed away, close to over 1 million people came out to mourn him. He's someone I look up to personally. I don't know if you care, but I just thought I'd share that with you. Lee Kuan Yew stepped down after serving as the world's longest prime minister on the 28th of November 1990. He was succeeded by his son. Despite not being the prime minister, he still oversaw the development of his country directly by standing in various advisory roles within the government, such as being a senior minister and minister mentor. He was announced dead on the 23rd of March 2015 at the ripe old age of 91. I recommend you read some books on Lee Kuan Yew, especially if you want to be a political leader or want to be just a grassroots leader or an activist. There's a lot to learn from Lee Kuan Yew. The selflessness, the vision, and also the coping through adversity. You must understand that Singapore was a tiny, or still is a tiny nation, and for you to be out of the union of Malaysia and sort of be thrown into the world, it takes a great man to be up to the task and to deliver on this. This is why I believe that Lee Kuan Yew is indeed a great historical figure and is deserving of being on our Histories Heroes series. So I hope you learned something from this video. I hope it inspired you to go out and learn about Lee Kuan Yew and about Singapore. Let me know if you'd like me to do a video on Singapore. Maybe I will down the line. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like, share it with your friends maybe, and subscribe so that you can check out some of my other content. My name is Djaji. I hope you have a blessed day, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.